the Eclipse 12 monitoring station floated in the silence of deep space, a remote facility built to track interstellar signals and record anomalous phenomena. For decades, its presence went unnoticed, carrying out its function in solitude and automatically. Until that night. In the heart of the control room, a sleepy technician was awakened by the sound of an unusual alarm. The red light pulsed on the panel, indicating a low-frequency transmission. Something coming from within the Calypso Delta Nebula. The technician adjusted the controls, trying to decipher the corrupted data. The transmission was a distant echo, filled with static and fragments of a human voice. "They are here, we are too." He furrowed his brow, recognizing a disturbing detail in the signal's header. The identification belonged to Horizon 9, an experimental cargo ship that had vanished over 30 years ago. The message, repetitive and broken, seemed like a distress call or perhaps a warning. The news quickly reached the Central Command of the New Earth Corporation, which had funded the original Horizon 9 mission. The ship, considered lost during a secret cargo transport operation, had been missing since it entered the nebula's territory. Despite efforts to locate it, no trace had been found. Now, the reappearance of the transmission reignited questions that had never been answered. What had happened to the crew, and why had the ship returned now? Determined to retrieve information and possibly understand what had occurred, the corporation formed a specialized rescue team. Among the chosen were Commander Eric Voss, a veteran in rescue missions, Dr. Lena Armitage, a scientist specializing in astrophysical phenomena, and Engineer Malik Torres, known for his ability to handle old and unpredictable systems. Along with 2 elite soldiers, the team embarked aboard the Raven, equipped with the best available technology. When the Raven reached the nebula, the team fell silent as they observed the imposing figure of Horizon 9. The ship appeared immaculate, floating like a preserved corpse. Despite the decades lost, its hull showed no signs of damage or corrosion, but a strange greenish light pulsed around it, as if the nebula itself had clung to it. Lena noticed something peculiar in the energy data. The ship was active, but emitted unusual frequencies, almost as if it were alive. Tension grew as the team followed the approach protocols. Inside the Raven, the silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of automatic systems. Eric broke the silence. "Make sure we're ready for anything. If this ship has reappeared, there's a reason, and we don't know if we want to find out what it is." As the team prepared to board the Horizon 9, the transmission signal began to change. The voice became clearer, but also more anguished. "They are here, we are too. Don't come." The entry into the Horizon 9 was marked by an unsettling silence. The access doors, though old, slid open smoothly, as if the ship had been waiting for them. The interior was shrouded in dimness, illuminated only by the flickering emergency lights and the beams from the team's flashlights. The smell of metal and something more indefinable, perhaps mold, perhaps decay, lingered in the air. Their footsteps echoed on the metal floor, a constant reminder that they were alone there. Or perhaps, not so alone after all. The team spread out along the main corridor. Lena watched the environmental readout monitors. Incredible. The life support system is operational, even after 30 years. This ship should be dead. Malik, the engineer, replied nervously, "The systems are dead, not the ships. This one seems alert." They moved on to the quarters section, where they found a disconcerting scene. The crew's belongings were scattered, as if they had left in haste, but without signs of conflict. A plate with remnants of food still sat on a table, fossilized by time. In the kitchen, a coffee mug remained on the counter, as if waiting for someone who never returned. The details were small, but they added to a feeling of interrupted abandonment. As they explored, signs that something was wrong began to manifest. Malik was the first to notice. "Did anyone else hear that?" The others stopped, attentive. A faint sound, like a murmur, seemed to spread through the ventilation system. Lena tried to capture the sound on her recorder, but it vanished as soon as the flashlights pointed to the direction it came from. Eric, experienced, ordered them to stay calm. Probably just the active ventilation system. Nothing more. But no one seemed convinced. The team reached the command bridge, where they found the Captain Jonas Hall's logbook. Eric activated the device, and the first entries seemed normal, a routine report, cargo, routes. But as they went through the logs, the entries became fragmented and chaotic. Jonas spoke of lights around the ship, figures that seemed to watch the crew. In a disturbing entry, he murmured, "The lights, they are us." But how is that possible? They know. They know who we are. The audio ended with a scream and a burst of static. Suddenly, communication with the Raven was interrupted, throwing the team into complete isolation. Lena frantically checked the communication devices. Nothing works. Something is interfering with the signals. Meanwhile, Malik was examining the ship's systems. This doesn't make sense. The Horizon 9 is operating as if it never stopped. But there's something in the core, something that's consuming energy. This is not human. Before they could discuss further, one of the soldiers pointed to the end of the corridor. Movement. They all turned at once, their flashlights illuminating only emptiness. But Lena saw something out of the corner of her eye, a translucent shadow, almost imperceptible, disappearing around the corner. As the team ventured deeper into the Horizon IX's corridors, the atmosphere seemed to grow heavier, almost as if the ship were watching their every move. Lena focused on the sensor data, but something strange began to happen. Sporadic readings indicated human presence in different sectors of the ship, but they disappeared as soon as they were checked. Malik looked at Lena with unease. If the systems are so intact, why are these readings so erratic? She hesitated before responding. Maybe they're not wrong. It was then that it happened for the first time. Malik, exploring a side compartment alone, felt something behind him. When he turned, he saw a translucent figure, made of pulsating light, standing in the corner of the corridor. He blinked, confused. The figure seemed familiar. When it raised its face, Malik froze. It was himself, but with an expression of pure terror. Before he could react, the figure vanished in a silent flash. The engineer ran back to the group, trying to explain what he had seen, but his words were met with skepticism. Eric insisted that they stay focused on the mission, but Lena, who had been analyzing the readings, began to notice a pattern. These figures, they appear where the human readings disappear. It's as if they're avoiding us. Meanwhile, the manifestations increased. One of the soldiers, Daniels, heard whispers coming from a dark corridor. Following the sound, he encountered his own figure of light, eyes wide and mouth open in a silent scream. He screamed, firing his weapon, but the figure vanished, leaving only a trail of light in the air. When the group found him, Daniels was trembling, repeating, "It's us. They are us." Lena began to piece things together. The figures of light were not just illusions, they were versions of the Horizon IX's crew. Or, worse yet, they were projections of the rescue team itself. In the logbook, Jonas Hall had described something similar, figures the crew saw around the ship, always with expressions of horror, as if they were witnessing something indescribable. The team tried to rationalize what was happening, but the psychological pressure began to take its toll. Malik started murmuring incoherent phrases, while Lena felt as though memories that weren't hers were surfacing in her mind. Eric, maintaining his leadership posture, ordered everyone to regroup and continue the investigation. It was then that one of the light figures reappeared, this time closer and more defined. It pointed in a specific direction, desperate, as if trying to communicate something. Lena had the courage to follow it, while the others hesitated. The figure led the group to a door marked as the cargo section before vanishing again. The cargo section was the most isolated area of the Horizon 9. Upon entering, the team was met with an almost tangible silence, broken only by the distant sound of electronic systems still in operation. The space was filled with massive metal containers, organized almost meticulously, but covered by decades of dust. Lena activated the scanner to identify the contents, but the reading returned a confusing signal. These containers, they're armored. Whatever they're storing here was designed not to be detected. As they explored, Malik located the control panel for the area and tried to access the records. After several minutes of frustrating attempts, he managed to unlock part of the system. In the cargo log, there was mention of a mysterious artifact called Object Theta 46, accompanied by a warning, for transport only. Do not open under any circumstances. Malik frowned, reading aloud. Whatever this is, they knew it was dangerous. The team's curiosity was interrupted when Lena noticed something peculiar. One of the light figures appeared at the far end of the sector, near one of the containers. But this time, it didn't disappear. It stood still, staring at the group, before raising a trembling hand and pointing at the same container. The figure was in a state of pure despair, its form unstable, as if it were trying to fight something invisible. Eric approached the indicated container, attempting to unlock the manual latch. Malik intervened, hesitant. Are you sure this is a good idea? There's a reason these things are locked. Eric didn't respond, but his expression was filled with determination. With a final effort, the container door opened, releasing a breath of air that had been trapped for decades. Inside, the group found a cylindrical glass capsule containing an opalescent material that seemed to constantly shift in shape and color. It emitted a pulsating energy, almost hypnotic. Lena observed the artifact, both fascinated and terrified at the same time. This thing, it's not natural. It's not made by humans. She began to realize that the ship's readings were directly connected to the artifact. It was the source of the unusual energy and, most likely, the reason for the disappearance of the original crew. Suddenly, the capsule began to vibrate. A wave of energy spread through the sector, extinguishing the lights and plunging the group into total darkness. When the flashlights were turned back on, something had changed. The light figures were now surrounding them, but their forms were more defined, more solid. And their faces were covered with expressions of absolute terror. Eric tried to order everyone to step back, but the capsule released another wave of energy that seemed to penetrate each of their minds. Lena fell to her knees, clutching her head, as memories that weren't hers flooded her mind. She saw flashes of what happened to the original crew, contact with the artifact, growing paranoia, and finally, the complete dissolution of their minds. The vibrations from the capsule intensified, sending sparks of energy through the cargo sector. The light figures began to react, moving erratically, as if trying to alert the team or prevent what was about to happen. Lena, still battling against the intrusive visions, managed to scream, "Seal the capsule. Now!" But Malik was paralyzed, staring at the opalescent form inside the glass prison. It was as if something within him was being drawn in, an invisible force that seemed to invade his mind and senses. Before Eric could act, a loud, penetrating sound resonated through the ship. It was like a scream, but not human. The capsule broke with a deafening snap, and the substance inside expanded, taking on an undefined, almost liquid form, but pulsating and alive. The temperature in the environment plummeted drastically, and the remaining lights began to flicker uncontrollably. The substance began to move, sliding across the floor and walls with impossible speed. Malik was the first to be touched. When the substance reached his leg, he screamed in pain, but it wasn't physical. What he felt was a direct assault on his sanity. He collapsed on the floor, clutching his head as he cried and laughed uncontrollably, muttering nonsensical phrases. "It's all a lie, we're already dead." Lena pulled Malik back as Eric ordered everyone to retreat, but the substance seemed to grow and split, spreading out to block all exits. It didn't just occupy space, it manipulated perception, making the corridors appear endless and the doors shift to impossible locations. Lena realized that this wasn't just a physical entity, it was a psychic predator, something that consumed the mind before the body. As they tried to escape, the light figures began to act more clearly. One of them, with Lena's face, appeared right in front of her and tried to hold her, its eyes full of pleading. Lena stopped, hesitant, until she realized the figure was pointing to a control panel in the corner of the room. "Eric! The panel! I think we can overload the systems and contain it." Eric hesitated, but he knew they had no choice. He ran to the panel while Lena tried to protect Malik, who was still lost in a delirious state. Daniels, the soldier who was with them, began to succumb as well. He saw his own light figure, approaching with a look of terror. When he tried to push it away, it merged with him, and he began to scream, reliving memories that seemed not to be his. Eric struggled to access the controls, but the system was protected by ancient codes. Lena ran to him, quickly inputting sequences she had learned during her initial research. "If we can redirect the main energy to the core, maybe we can seal this thing back in the capsule. But we need to do it fast." The substance, sensing the threat, began to attack the panel directly, its pulsating forms invading the circuits and causing the system to fail. Eric, in a moment of desperation, grabbed the rifle and shot at the substance, only to realize it was futile. Lena finally managed to access the energy diversion, but she knew the process would take several minutes. The cargo sector was now total chaos. The substance, growing in size and intensity, seemed alive, almost conscious. It moved like a predator, hunting the team as its psychic echoes plunged everyone into an endless cycle of visions and torment. Malik, still struggling with his sanity, murmured incessantly about memories of lives he had never lived. Daniels, on the other hand, stood motionless, his gaze lost, completely surrendered to the horror. Lena screamed instructions at Eric while trying to keep the substance at bay. The energy diversion was at 60% and slowly increasing. But every second felt endless, with the entity getting closer and closer. It was then that Lena saw her light figure again. This time, it was closer, almost touching her. Its expression was one of anguish, but its eyes were pleading. "It's not just about us," Lena murmured, trying to decipher its meaning. The figure pointed to Malik, still paralyzed with terror, and then to the control panel. Lena understood. She ran to Malik and tried to bring him back to reality. "Malik, I need you. You know how to speed up the diversion." He blinked, confused, as if trying to fight against the substance's control over his mind. Finally, he nodded and started working, his trembling fingers flying over the controls. The energy on the ship began to fluctuate. Lights flickered uncontrollably, while a deep, pulsating sound echoed through the walls. The substance reacted with fury, advancing toward the panel like a dark tidal wave. Eric fired at it, but his shots only delayed it momentarily. Lena looked at the light figures around them. They seemed desperate, some trying to protect the group, others merely watching, as if they knew the end was near. When the diversion hit 90%, the substance changed tactics. It divided into multiple smaller forms and attacked the team directly. One of these forms struck Daniels, who screamed before falling to the floor, his body writhing in spasms. He looked at Lena with wide eyes and murmured, "Don't let it out," before becoming completely still. Eric shouted to Lena and Malik, "Hurry! We're running out of time." Malik typed in the last commands while Lena tried to protect the controls. Finally, the diversion hit 100%. An explosion of energy coursed through the ship, illuminating everything in a blinding flash. The substance howled, its form disintegrating momentarily, but not completely. The capsule in the center of the cargo sector began to rebuild, pulling the substance back inside. The light figures also started to disappear, but not before casting one last look at the group. It was a look of sadness, resignation, and a silent warning. Lena realized that the containment process was draining the ship's remaining energy. The Horizon 9 is going to collapse. We have to leave now. Eric and Lena grabbed Malik, who was exhausted, and ran through the corridors as the ship violently shook. They reached the entrance, where the rescue ship awaited them. With one last leap, they managed to board the rescue vessel, which immediately moved away. The Horizon 9 was now just a distant silhouette, engulfed by explosions that consumed the structure. In the final moment, the ship was completely consumed by a silent explosion, disappearing into the darkness of the nebula. Inside the rescue ship, silence reigned. Malik was catatonic, and Lena held her head in her hands, trying to process what had just happened. Eric, although trying to maintain composure, looked at Lena and asked, "Is it over? Did we make it?" Lena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked out the window of the ship. Outside, in the vastness of space, a small opalescent light flickered before disappearing completely. She took a deep breath, but her gaze said it all, that horror had not ended. As the rescue ship drifted away, the final entry of the Horizon IX's log flickered on the console, containing one last message. The voice of the original captain echoed, "Whatever it is, never let it escape."